Hello, my friends. So, I owe you guys an apology. I was not able to finish the Halloween 2021 series with part 12, which was going to be a Dawn of the Dead special. I watched all three extant cuts of the film, and I was going to just talk about each one and just talk about my relationship with the film, my long storied love affair with my favorite horror film ever, and it just wasn't meant to be. So, um, the next 3 days are going to be full and stressful. Excuse me. I'm already falling asleep to try to re energize for them. But I wanted to talk about a few things today. Not really do a review per se, but just a couple of quick things that are on my mind and some plans for uh, the channel in upcoming days. So, the main one I wanted to mention was, in addition to continuing the Blue Review and all its different permutations, um, I may be resuming the Bottomless Well and delving into some music reviews. Excuse me. Um, the Space Rock special, which I recorded the first two episodes of, is on indefinite hold. After 2 intensive months of research and tons of listening and bookmarking and making playlists and taking notes. It just, um, I guess I burn out on it. And yeah, it was going to be hard with work and other projects and my eBay going on, which I was trying to resuscitate, which now is slowly coming back to life somewhat. If you'd like to purchase something, the link is down below in the description. Please check it out. I've got a lot of inexpensive and hard to find and interesting items for sale. So, the other thing, other than maybe doing some music coverage, especially if some more obscure stuff, at least obscure to a lot of people, and maybe not too many, uh, because I have been listening to a lot of new stuff, new to me, in the last couple of weeks, pretty much nonstop, immersing myself in a number of bands and subgenres that I had not explored as much as I would have liked to. So, time is short. So I am on with it. Um, the other thing I want to work on the channel is I want to review a few of the um, collections of classic Marvel comics uh, in trade paperback. The Epic collections by Marvel, which are in color, slick paper, and maybe even review some of the Marvel Essentials, which are black and white and mostly out of print, but still, there's a lot of gems in there. Excuse me. And as I'm selling more and more of my back issue collection of individual issues, I'm upgrading. I'm getting a hold of these collections, so I will always have the stories to read, and I can let go of the individual issues. I'm not going to be doing that with every individual issue, and I still have a lot of things that haven't been collected yet, a lot of things that mean a lot to me. But I will say this is a good direction for me personally, and then it gives me a standalone item to review. Um, I already have at least three immediately lined up for review in the near future. Wow, okay. I need some sleep or coffee. Too late in the day for coffee, though. So, uh, that brings me to the other subject I was going to mention, which is what's going on in the MCU. I cover that once in a while. Um, I reviewed the Shang-Chi and Legend of the Ten Rings films, and that was like a movie length review. But I got a pretty good reception for it. I tried to, and I'm sure succeeded in exhausting the topic and anyone watching the video. Um, well, I'd like to do a similar thing for the Eternals, but based on the trailers and some things I've picked up here and there off of Wikipedia, and then the general tenor of the reviews, just following the headlines, I haven't I haven't read any of these articles yet. They're mostly the mainstream media stuff like CNN and whatever. But the clickbait in the mainstream is pretty much that the movie is garbage. I have mixed feelings about this because one of the headlines even evoked the name Jack Kirby, and I think, does someone at CNN really know about Jack Kirby and has read the Kirby Eternals? I don't see it. I really don't. I mean, unless they were getting paid their huge salary, I guess. Rachel Maddow, who makes $30,000 a day, probably could have skimmed through it for them, but she wouldn't cover it on camera. Um, and she wouldn't like the issues with the Russians trying to fight the Celestials. Um, but in this case, I feel like the MSM is going to be ready to pounce. Like, oh, Marvel fucked up. Finally, they're on a winning streak. Now this proves their comics are shallow. I mean, their comics movies are shallow garbage. Um, so this might be a case where I might agree with their appraisal, but from a totally different vantage point. So they're looking at it as, aha, a Marvel movie that proves that they're vapid and pointless and just storm and fury and CGI and no center. And my contention though is that it's storm and fury and CGI and no center because it is a radical departure from the work of Jack Kirby. Uh, you know, the story could have only been done a number of ways cinematically, and not many of them are ways that are in vogue these days in commercial mainstream cinema. Maybe if it was made in Europe or Asia or I don't know. I just don't think Hollywood slash Disney slash Marvel is really the right place to try to create this kind of strange world that Kirby created. And the thing that sucks is they didn't even try to replicate it on a cosmetic level, as they did with Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther, which took tons of tons of Jack Kirby's designs. And, I'm pretty sure that Black Panther won an Oscar for production design. Quite a lot of it was based on Jack Kirby. So rather than take this as a sign that, oh, here's a holy Kirby creation that we can't in any way stick Stan Lee's name on, uh, we're just going to toss it in the garbage. We're going to skim over the Neil Gaiman iteration, and then we're just going to make up the rest of the shit whole cloth. And we're going to try to change as many things as possible to try to pander and create representation racially and gender wise, which, when not a whole lot was really needed, if you look at the makeup of the original Eternals, uh, they went a little bit overboard. Um, and, I'm not going to get into all that right now. I'm sure anyone watching this who's excited about the film could care less about what I think and is going to say, how can you slag it until you've seen it? Okay, well, you know, trailers are there for a purpose. If they're well done, they make you want to see the movie. If they're poorly done, they make you want to run the opposite direction. So the latter was my reaction to the Eternals, all the Eternals trailers. A few seconds of Salma Hayek talking gave me promise, hope. I covered that in several episodes back. But that's not enough. It's a mess, and I think it's a mess. Everyone's saying it's a mess, but I think I may agree with them on certain levels. But in other ways, I think it's a mess that maybe they're not seeing because they're not familiar with the source material. They're not familiar with the vision of the creator, and they're you know it's really, I don't know, at this point. who knows? Apparently the pre-order tickets for this far exceed those of Shang-Chi. So this movie could still make a ton of money and yet be universally hated or almost universally hated. There are going to be certain camps that are going to like it no matter what. Contrarians, fan bros who are contrarians, MCU loyalists to the nth degree, people who just like big special effects laden action with lasers firing out of people's eyes. And I'm not making fun of that. That's one of the few things that actually was adapted straight from the comic books. Um, but to me, it's just kind of big and gross and ugly and lacking in depth. A huge amount of the not just the plot, but the basic plot is taken from Neil Gaiman's miniseries from the 2000s of the Eternals, which I didn't care for. Uh, I thought it was pretty lightweight. It was just like, I'm going to tell a story about the Eternals, and that's basically all he did. And he was Neil Gaiman. So when Neil Gaiman tells a story, it's a hit. People read it. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to really have anything to do with what it's based on. It could have been a totally fabricated story about a group of gods who lose their memories and walk among humanity and find each other gradually, and the culprit is the least one you'd least suspect. That framework is apparently the framework of this film, and they're using it to also reconcile the uh, continuity with the snap, the blip, the Thanos event of Infinity War and Endgame. But beyond that, they've changed really some major core concepts that made the Eternals interesting. Larger than life things uh, that you don't need to scale down because you're already going to have Celestials in it. I don't know. I mean, after watching Shang-Chi and exploring this magic universe they did based around Asian mythology and imagery, there was really no reason whatsoever for the Eternals not to be a beautiful visual translation of Kirby's. Uh, uh, just the his look, his feel, his vibe that they used to call it the cosmic Kirby's cosmic consciousness. It could have been a golden opportunity to bring that to the masses, and even if it failed, it would have been a cult movie forever and loved by hardcore Kirby fans. Uh, but it's like they threw not only the baby out with the bathwater, they threw fucking everything in the toilet and flushed it. And I don't know, it that this kind of attitude has come back to bite Kevin Feige on the ass before with the Mandarin casting and with the Ancient One casting. Uh, Trying to play it too safe or too hardcore into the representation angle, and not enough into the fidelity to the stories, which, if you'd been faithful to the stories, well, I mean, changing the Ancient One and the Mandarin to um, non-Chinese characters in order to not offend anyone is kind of offensive. And dare I say, it's kind of racist. And it's like saying, we can't portray these races because that's racism, that's cultural appropriation. Well, I don't know if Figa has apologized for the Ancient One debacle, and he's explained and explained and explained himself about the Shang-Chi situation with the Mandarin and Iron Man and etc. So he's kind of tried to course correct, at least with the Mandarin. Too late to course correct with the Ancient One. Um, but this was a chance to do something where you really could have had all these races and even sexual orientations represented within the framework of what was already on paper. Only a couple of things could have been changed. Like, I don't have a problem with Salma Hayek playing Ajax instead of a male actor. First of all, Salma Hayek is the descendant of I mean, she's Mexican. She's the descendant of the Aztecs, Toltecs, whatever, that Ajax hung out with in ancient times and integrated with, and who his costume and his machinery and everything inspired a lot of the Aztec Toltec art in the temples and pyramids. This is all established in the second issue of the Eternals original series. So actually giving Salma Hayek that part as the spiritual leader and the interface between the Eternals and the Celestials, with her gravitas as an actress and her costume, which wasn't exactly Aztec Toltec, but it did follow Kirby's color scheme. Sometimes that's all they can get right. It's like the color, and you know, uh, I think that's enough. She's fine as Ajax. That was one of the best ideas. The bland, the bland homoerotic looking guy playing Icarus, they could have made him gay and it would have been very believable. Icarus had an affair with a human woman in the comics. I could see where they wanted to, unshackle themselves from the baggage of that kind of thing. Because you already have Thor and Jane Foster. Why retread this again so soon? But he looks too much like a model, too gay, and too sterile. Um, Icarus was a kind of a rowdy, you know, uh, boisterous guy. I mean, and he had long blonde hair. Why can't anyone have long hair in a Marvel movie? I mean, Thor, and that's not even Hemsworth's real hair. And Loki has longish hair, and I don't know if that's real or not. But the point is, I mean, why couldn't you have an actor, or at least a actor wearing a wig, have the character with long blonde hair? This was a Kirby archetype. It doesn't mean he was politically incorrect or a Nazi or an Aryan lover. Quite the contrary. He was a Jew who hated Nazis. But look at Thor, Kazar, Icarus, Captain Victory, Commandy. These are 5 characters Kirby visually designed by himself, and they all have the long blonde hair and at least partially bare torso, except for Captain Victory. Well, Captain Victory and Icarus have the metal costumes, but Kazar and Thor and Commandy are all, you see a lot of their arms and torsos. You could argue that's homoerotic, but not really, not by I mean, homoerotic to me is more of the appealing to the more clean cut, kind of muscle bound, ripped, kind of just celebrating the fleshiness of the male body and the male form, and also the clean cut kind of stereotype uh, of a gay man, which a lot of gay men are not clean cut and have a frost streak in their hair. But this particular actor really strikes me as gay. Maybe he's not, and they could have made the character gay. Like I said, it would have been fine with me because it's better than making him Cersei's boyfriend. The two of them were longtime friends, but also had a lot of antipathy toward each other, skepticism. They ribbed each other. They gave each other a hard time. Cersei was very mischievous, as implied by her name, turning people to pigs. Icarus was very adventurous. The two of them either fought together or fought each other. They had an interesting dynamic, but now they're lovers. I don't have a problem with Cersei being portrayed by an Asian actress instead of a Greek looking actress, which would have probably been more appropriate. Um, that's fine. And she does have the green outfit, but they made her character too docile, too kind, too romantic. None of these are really qualities of Cersei. Of course, yes, I have to see the movie, but based on the clips I've seen and the descriptions of these characters, Cersei and Icarus have this lengthy love affair. And that's just total bullshit. Um, yes, Cersei does have a boyfriend who will become the Black Knight. That was in the comics too. Uh, that's fine. And Cersei was living on Earth. Cersei just wasn't really a nice character. She was nicer when she joined the Avengers and did hook up with the Black Knight. But many years before that, in the Kirby books, she was a little catty, but she could back it up. You know, she was fearless. Um, she was a very strong character, stronger than Thena in some ways. Now I'm glad they made Thena strong. Angelina Jolie was a good choice. Her costume is the most accurate to the character, really, of any of the Eternals characters. The Celestials are pretty close, but the Deviants don't look anything like the Deviants in the comics. Um, I look at all these action figures and I'm like, all they have is these round designs. You know, they're all supposed to have this kind of formulaic kind of thing. Marvel has kind of has this tendency with costuming anyway, and they broke it with Ragnarok and Black Panther because of using the Kirby stuff. This was their perfect opportunity. Instead, this they did a retrogressive thing and had these kind of costumes with all these redundant lines and circles and whatever, and the same symbols on all their costumes as though they're all tapping into the same cosmic energy. It's like you don't have to hit us over the head with a sledgehammer. We get it. You know, if the Eternals can be explained succinctly in a comic book 45 years ago, there's no reason it can't be succinctly explained in the first half hour of this movie or into this movie in flashbacks. I mean, if you could explain Thanos and all this other stuff, why not? I mean, the trailer kind of explains the Eternals, but at the same time, there's holes, and there's holes because the original concept was more interesting, and it's been thrown out the door. The audience's inroad to the concept is the Neil Gaiman framework. It should have been the Kirby framework. Now, admittedly, the Kirby framework was based on Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. So there aren't many stories or pop culture things, much less things that purport to be true, as Von Daniken did, where we're waiting for the ancient gods to return, and they inspired the Aztecs, the Toltecs, and the Mayans. You know, I mean, this inspired Battlestar Galactica TV series. I mean, a lot of people slam Battlestar Galactica, the original, as a ripoff of Star Wars, but that's really a visual thing with the spaceships and weaponry. But the actual concepts behind Battlestar Galactica are all mythological, biblical, astrological. Did I say that already? Astrological, mythological, biblical, and to do with ancient astronauts. Um, it was of its time. Uh, One reason I didn't like the remake series is that it threw all that aside for kind of a vague spirituality. Uh, yeah. Um, but it's the same idea. You could have modernized Battlestar Galactica and kept those elements to the fore. I mean, some of them are in there, but they're not exploited. You know, if you could get a comic book writer like Grant Morrison to write an Eternal series instead of Neil Gaiman, and not just tell a story about some Eternals because he likes telling the story about the gods and fantasy and stuff, but actually dig into it, the archetypes and the layers. You could have had an incredible, piece of work. Um, but Gaiman's popular, and Marvel really didn't. The Eternals were just laying around, and that kind of brought the Eternals back into the mainstream, and so they've kind of milked it here and there, directionlessly through a series of miniseries. The latest one is not really poorly written, and it's got nice art, but it's conceptually it's all over the fucking map, and it alters and retcons a lot of the original concepts. Uh, it's like Marvel's ashamed of the Eternals. I get why they were ashamed of Shang-Chi because Kung Fu was over. They were terrified of Asian stereotyping and Fu Manchu. I mean, I still don't think those are all great excuses, but I get it. Eternals, why? Why be ashamed? Okay, you could say, well, that Von Daniken shit's, dated from the 70s. Let's approach it differently. Well, to me, Gaiman's concept from the 2000s is not dated, but it's just simple, and his stories are generally very simple. I mean, a lot of times they have meaning. That one, I couldn't really discern a meaning to it. It was just a story to tell a story, and he's good at that. But I think to try to use that to condense Kirby's ideas was a foolish prism to try to do that with. Um, Chloe Zhao's ideas don't impress me. I haven't seen her movies. There's nothing against her as a filmmaker or anything else about her. But it seemed like this is more important for Marvel to push the fact that the first Asian female director to win an Oscar is doing this movie and making it all beautiful and breathtaking, and that seems to be more important. That and all the race and gender swaps, and it's really those things are not the heart of this concept. Go make up your own concept with all that, or adapt something that is more leans itself to that. Um, I don't intend to see the Eternals in the theater. I'm actively boycotting it in the theater. I'll watch it on Disney Plus when it ambles its way there. I'll keep an eye on its box office with interest, and I will start reading some reviews eventually. Though I'm sure a lot of them will be painful. I'm not sure which will be more painful: the corporate bullshit ones slagging it for the wrong reasons, or the fan bro clickbait sites praising it for the wrong reasons. I'll wade through a few, I guess. Um, I am going to review a book though that I obtained because I'm selling. I had most of the original Kirby Eternals run. I had the entire 1980s Eternals miniseries by Peter B. Gillis, Sal Buscema, and Walt Simonson. I sold that as a set for $100 about a year ago. Um, it's going for more now, I believe, because the movie's closer. Uh, but anyway, I've got most of the original series. So far, I've only sold one issue. Um, so I'm hoping they sell quickly while they're still going for a large amount because of the movie anticipation. Because of all the reviews do the movie in, and everybody starts saying "fuck Eternals," then the comics are going to go down in value, and I really need the money badly. So do something for me, Chloe Zhao and Kevin Figa, for God's sake. Um, and that's really about it. So anyway, so I bought the complete Jack Kirby collection, color epic collection. So it's issues 1 through 19 and the annual. Like I said, most of which I had and I'm selling. Um, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Vibrant colors. It's just, and to read it back to front to back is beautiful. Just like reading the collected Omax book was just a pleasure. So you get in that groove and you see how Kirby was thinking ahead long term and how these long drawn out endless stories like he started doing in the mid 60s on Thor and Fantastic Four, he started doing, not Stan Lee. He brought them to Stan Lee to edit or dialogue or what have you. Um, that ever expanding epic thing. I mean, he was always looking forward, planting seeds, foreshadowing. He was a great storyteller. The Eternals, as Kirby did it, with some updates and modernization, could have been an incredible uh, TV series with the ever unfolding concepts. But they made a poor decision, and I believe in karma. So however poorly they made the decision, ultimately, I can't render a full verdict, obviously, without seeing it. Uh, but I've rendered, close to one. Uh, However bad they fuck it up, or go fuck it up going forward, or try to fix it later, uh, it's going to come back on them. It's going to have some kind of effect on them, either financially or critically or respectfully from fans. I don't think there's going to be a lot of huge amount of fan outrage like there are for the bigger properties like X-Men, changing so much in the movies because there aren't that many Eternals diehards, but I am one of them. And I'm well aware of Kirby's few shortcomings and at least things that could be viewed as shortcomings that wouldn't translate to a modern audience as well. And I've already enumerated a few of them. Those could have all been taken care of. Replacing Kirby's broad satirical, uh, literate humor with, um, trendy pop culture joke, nudge nudge Marvel witticisms, humor, quote unquote humor, uh, isn't really improving the situation. You're just basically you're trading one thing that you consider banal for something that everyone considers banal. So, again, except for the super Marvel diehards, um, the fact that the Eternals trailers end with a bad one-liner followed by a long, like 10-15 second pause, as though to tell you this is funny the way Marvel does, and then the reaction and the little dig back. Yeah, I mean, it kind of says it all, really. I mean, the Shang-Chi movie. Katie said we make a good team and laughed as the bus got cut in half, but you didn't even know what that was about, right? I mean, you don't even know what this Eternal stuff is about, but they're milking it a lot more. It's just it's not funny. It's not entertaining. Maybe in the context of the movie, I don't know. And making Fastos gay is fine, though it seems a little odd. But not really. I mean, you could be a strapping macho black man who kills deviants and is a deviant hater, and it's a black man who's a racist, literally. That would have been interesting. Uh, and a weapon forger, that would have been cool if they kept him. That wasn't a Kirby creation, that was a Peter Gillis creation. And it was good. They needed a major black Eternal. They already had some Asians and other races in there and genders. Um, but making him a gay man with a little very fey, girlfriend kind of personality, and robbing him of that manhood. I mean, you can be gay and still be manly. You know, that's what I was talking about homoerotic. I don't care if he's homoerotic. He should have been the homoerotic character, not Icarus. He should have been the character that looked, to me, that had that masculinity. And you could even comment on black masculinity and things like that, like the episode of Black Mirror called Striking Vipers with Anthony Mackie and Yahya Abdul Mateen, where, you got two guys who, tend to play superheroes and iconic black male figures, and they're playing guys who seemingly have a buddy buddy relationship, but it's developing these homosexual undercurrents, and it's there's a taboo there within that culture between them, manifesting that, and it's brilliant drama. Uh, they could have done that with Fastos. Why not, man? Why am I not writing these things? No, don't ask that. Don't answer that. Yeah, instead this kind of comedy relief. He's like a nerdy guy with glasses. I guess that means he's a technician, like more like a builder, a scientist, but not like a forger. He was more like a Hephaestus like character. That's why he was named Fastos, because the Eternals, as Kirby conceived them, could have been the inspiration for the Greek pantheon. Hence, Icarus, and it is pronounced Icarus. That's clear in all the comics, but in the movie they're going to call him Icarus anyway. Makari was Mercury. They turned Makari into a female of indeterminate, that I can't determine race. I would say maybe Middle Eastern. That's fine. I would have made her probably the Greek-looking character, but um, and it doesn't seem to be best friends with Icarus anymore. Um, Athena was Athena. Zuras, the head of the pantheon, the king of the Eternals, whatever, the Lord, Zeus, obviously. Uh, so there's a lot of these, kind of things in there. And then there's Gilgamesh, was Gilgamesh. Though in the Kirby run, he wasn't actually called Gilgamesh. It was strongly implied he had been the inspiration for Gilgamesh and other heroic figures of myth. He was only developed later in the comics. He joined the Avengers and he was in some Thor issues. I was, having him in the book, in the movie seemed kind of unnecessary, but that's fine. I mean, he was a comic character. Having him have this long, weird relationship with Thena, sorry, seems unimportant. I mean, the trailer hints that Crow of the Deviants wants to sexually molest Thena, and he's like the very grotesque and distorted character, barely humanoid. Um, Again, Crow and Thena, their races are enemies, but they were lovers for centuries on and off. That's much more compelling than the Cersei Icarus Icarus romance. I mean, the way Kirby did their romance was fantastic because she was the princess of the Eternals, and then she would go and hang out with the Deviants. And even though she was disgusted by their behavior and the way they treated each other and their slaves, and hated the way they hated the Eternals, uh, she kept an open mind, and she was in love with Crow, and Crow had nobility despite his evil. I don't know. These are classic themes. I know they're obviously going to touch on the Crow Athena thing. It should have been a major subplot to me. It should have been. It should have been a really major way to show the bridge between those two races, rather than here's the Eternals. They fire beams out of their eyes. Here are the Deviants. They're water sea monsters, and we fire the beams at them, and they go into the water and scream, and there's lots of CGI, and it's all exciting. That doesn't appeal to me. Uh, so that's about it. I'm going to wrap this up. But, just a few thoughts on the Eternals, the film, and the comic prior to the release of the film and prior to my review of the original Jack Kirby collection. So hopefully that'll tide you over till next time. Take care.